morning, Lucas. Um, you mentioned that you wanted to discuss technical cleanliness and the intricacy of clean room construction. Why is that an interesting topic for us to be discussing today?
Yes, thank you. Good morning. Clean rooms, in my opinion, have slowly found their way into more and more industries over the past years. So you definitely often hear about them in connection to pharmaceutical and
Mm.
semiconductor production. But you actually find them also in other industries that you wouldn't think about. For example, the food industry or others. So I think that many of your listeners will get in touch with them in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. So, what kind of different applications are clean rooms used in?
Yeah, so the obvious ones I mentioned already are the pharmaceutical and medical application production,
Mm.
as well as semiconductors and the aerospace. But basically, also in the food industry, you already find them more and more important. Same as in the pharmaceutical industry, where you want to have production from any germs, viruses, and
Yeah.
fungi. You want to expand the expiration dates of the food by
Mm.
protecting them from any particles that could carry those harmful particles like germs, viruses, and fungi. And if you take the semiconductor industry, there you had really big computers in the past that were filling entire rooms where a bug causing a problem was an actual bug that was basically crawling over some big piece of hardware. But nowadays, due to the change in size, it could be a very small conductive particle that could cause a malfunction, basically.
Yeah. Wow. It's so funny to hear about the origins of a phrase that we're using all the time. I've grown up where a bug has literally just been your computer won't turn on or something. Um, and in your background, you've moved from automotive and pharmaceutical industries and now working in the battery sector.
Mhm.
Why is maintaining clean room standards so important in this industry?
Yeah, there's several reasons why maintaining technical cleanliness is very important. Basically, it starts with preventing particles that could cause issues inside the cell. So probably you've heard of thermal runaways. If you haven't heard of them, you have for sure seen them in the news when people were speaking about battery fires, probably cars
Yeah,
or
yeah,
electric
yeah.
scooters going aflame. And one of the reason, it doesn't have to be the reason every time, but one of the reason could be um, that a conductive or small metal particle is basically causing an internal short circuit in the cell, and that
Mm.
causes an internal discharge, which could lead to heat and then to a fire. But there is also like other important factors. For example, the receivers of the cells, so the automotive car manufacturers, they have certain requirements for cleanliness on the outside of the cells because they stack them into packs. So basically, bigger particles that end up on the outside could lead to mechanical problems when they are stacked and pressed together. Um,
Wow.
Yes, but also what is worth a while to mention is that in the battery manufacturing, we are not using just clean rooms, but a special variation of those. And so
Yeah.
we also need to secure a very low level of humidity that we can do by dehumidification of those production areas. And basically, some of the characteristics of the clean rooms go hand in hand with this. low-level humidity rooms. You use some of the same principles to maintain the low humidity in those rooms that you use to maintain the low level of particles.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's, I hear the phrase clean room a lot. And to me, I have an idea that it's something like a surgery room or something like a hospital.
Mm-hmm.
But for listeners unfamiliar, and I'm sure there's quite a lot of them, can you explain what a clean room is and what technical cleanliness means in practice?
Yes, absolutely. So the example that you mentioned with the surgical rooms is actually a very good one, because surgical rooms are nothing else than a controlled environment where you try to keep the particles above the patient also to a minimum. So you apply some of the same principles as those particles could carry bacteria, viruses, or stuff that could end up in the wound and then cause harm to the patient later. And if you think about lying in bed in the morning and there is a beam of light shining through the window, you can actually see how many millions of particles are flying around in the air.
Yeah.
So there is around 35 to 50 million of those particles per cubic meter of air naturally, depending on where you're at. So there's also, of course, some influences depending on how dry it is or in which area of the world you're at. But this is a number that is like publicly used. And when you want to build one of those controlled environments, basically you cut this number by at least 10 times for low standard clean rooms, but you could also cut it down to having only around 10 particles per cubic meter
Wow.
for the highest standard. And
Oh,
this is basically done by controlling the air inside the room. So you build like a closed envelope of a special architectural system that is quite airtight, I would say, and easy to clean. Um, and then you basically only introduce filtered air and you filter it several times per hour, and by that achieve this high level of cleanliness.
cool.
And when you take the term technical cleanliness, this basically comes from the automotive industry. And there they started this, let's say, movement also by the technology advancement, that everything became smaller and those small particles could clog up, for example, a nozzle in a fuel injection system or in a brake system or something. So they had to ensure that during production, none of those particles end up in those systems and cause safety issues. Yeah.
Yeah. And earlier you were describing when fires are happening in batteries,
Mhm.
that's not only possible contamination when you're making the cell itself, but also in the automotive manufacturers. So clearly there's responsibility at every kind of stage of the chain. Can you describe the specific challenges of implementing clean rooms in the battery industry, both so in terms of the construction, but then later on the side of the user and the operator of the clean rooms?
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, regarding the battery fires, I have to say that basically this internal short circuit that could be caused by a particle is like a very small percentage, and usually you filter out those cells before they end up in the cars or at the end
Yeah,
user, so they don't reach the user. But basically, when you have an accident later on, also the mechanical manipulation that happens when the cell is deformed causes a similar phenomena. But to the specific challenges, basically in the battery industry, it is currently like a race in this industry because
yeah,
the electrification is very important. So there is a lot of time pressure behind it. And Europe's ambitions are very high to catch up with
Mm.
what Asia is basically doing already in the battery industry, because they have a very big knowledge and experience in manufacturing batteries. So yeah, the time pressure is basically a problem when you start recruiting people, and when you do not have much time for construction and onboarding. Yeah, it gets very tricky. And then this added topic of the required dryness in the rooms basically adds to the complexity of the clean rooms.
Yeah.
So if you take somebody from pharmaceutical or semiconductor industry, or companies that are already experienced in building those clean rooms, they still need to get familiar with this dryness factor, which is new, also driving cost and complexity. So if you basically then want to run a gigafactory, and you
Mm.
need thousands of people, of skilled workers, um, you start needing people for construction, for building it up, that have experience with clean rooms and those dry rooms basically. Then you need later in operations the operators that need to follow the right procedures while working in the rooms, cleaning and maintaining the equipment, taking care of the logistics and everything. Yeah, makes the whole thing very complex.
Yeah. I like what you're saying about it's kind of a race. I feel like I get that impression from companies chasing green hydrogen and yeah, the European fight to kind of have our own European battery production that can compete with what Asia's doing.
Mhm.
And you're right, there's a really familiar message of there being a lack of talent in the industry. And from what you're saying, it's both in experienced candidates and on an individual level, but also in companies who could bring technical experience from other areas. How do you see other industries transferring their experience into the battery industry, and what makes this cross-industry innovation possible?
So I think there is a lot of potential for companies entering the battery industry in general. Probably not producing batteries by themselves, but
Yeah.
if you take producing manufacturing equipment, there is so much potential in Europe for suppliers that were supplying the automotive industry or the food industry, or whatever. So if you take basically the downstream process of battery manufacturing piece by piece, it starts with a slurry mixing, where you basically mix some ingredients with a solvent or a liquid. So the first familiar thing that comes in mind for me is some mixing of paint, probably, or
Mm.
mixing other large batches of powders with liquids. So I think there should be a possibility to find companies that are familiar with that already, and basically develop into that. Of course, it's very complex, but I think should be possible.
Mm.
Um, then there is coating, where you coat this mixture on the electrode foil. So also there you see basically a connection between other coating processes. So I think there is also suppliers in Europe that have experience there. And the rest of this process is basically handling thin material or foils as well. Um, and there could be maybe somebody from paper manufacturing, or some other type of foil or thin material handling that could find a good transfer of their knowledge into this industry. And one of the last steps then is filling, where from my background, basically with pharmaceutical companies,
Mm.
there is already a lot of filling processes for some injection liquids or something. So, or from the food industry, filling those how do you call them? Those squeeze packs for kids, basically companies
Like
that could
tubes.
have. Yeah, if you have experience with that, probably you can also build, let's say, a very clean machine that could fill battery cells. Of course,
Okay, yeah.
there is like a lot of additional work needed to make it compliant, but there is already a very good base of clean application in the food industry that would ease that entry. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's such a huge opportunity because I don't think it's an industry that's going anywhere anytime soon. Um, and so for candidates, for individuals, um, why is it difficult to find experienced workers in clean environments? I think you've already touched on it a bit. And what kind of skills and awarenesses do you feel that they need to develop to do well in this industry?
Yeah, so what I mentioned already is basically everything is getting smaller and smaller.
Yeah.
And there was a guy in 1965, Gordon Moore, who predicted basically that all those computers are going to get smaller and smaller, and that the computing power is going to double every 2 years, while devices shrinking. So basically, while everything is getting smaller and those particles, those very tiny ones that you can actually barely see with the naked eye, could cause harm in those machines. You need to follow procedures, even though you cannot see those particles with your eye. You need to follow the procedures basically before you could see them. So if you compare it to your home, you shouldn't vacuum clean the room when there is a lot of dust settled everywhere, but you should actually just do it frequently after a certain period of time to prevent this accumulation. And you can transfer that a little bit, so that you could say you need to develop standard procedures and follow them and have this level of awareness to also
Yeah.
follow them, even though you are not visually reminded all the time. Yeah, what is difficult is basically you do not have a lot of skilled clean room personnel
Mm.
sitting around in Europe
No.
waiting to be to be deployed in a job, because they are probably already working in pharmaceutical
Yeah.
business, which is also like quite safe or crisis stable one.
Yeah.
Yeah, basically you need start training people. You need to find people with the right awareness and mindset, and then you need continuous training over weeks or months before you can actually deploy them in a clean room.
Yeah. Yeah. So they need to understand the importance of that discipline in, even when you can't see a problem, it's
Yeah,
prevention, not cure. Um, so there's obviously reskilling and upskilling is going to play quite a big role here. Um,
absolutely.
and I know you've already mentioned things like pharmaceutical and semiconductor, but are there any particular industries where you feel like workers could transition nicely into battery industry?
Yeah, I think basically everybody who was like handling other intricate processes, like for example, from any chemical plants, could have an easy entrance. Also, people working in labs or something like that before, um, but I think it's not limited to that. I think that everybody who is handling machines basically in all other sorts of industry could find his entry into the clean room if they are willing to pick up that topic and learn about it. And as I said, follow those procedures. And I think it's also not only about people working inside the clean rooms. We also need a lot of people that are capable of working in construction to actually build those rooms, bring in the machines into the rooms, install those. So if you take building the actual clean room, this which is which is like a room in a room. So basically, you take a big factory and you build a couple of rooms inside those voids in the factory. Is like when you're fitting out an office building in a bigger city. So there is a lot of architectural system manufacturers for clean rooms that also have office fit out walls and ceilings in their portfolio. So I think also people skilled in that could find an easy entry into building those architectural systems, or if you have a background in ventilation, which is for my personal opinion, the heart and core of a clean room, you can also find an easy entrance, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, and that along with electric cars and battery production, the other topic of the moment that goes hand in hand is the energy transition, and something we obviously want to keep at the forefront of public discourse. And I know that my audience, being in mostly in power and renewable sectors, is very interested in. What role do you view the battery industry playing in the Energiewende or the energy transition?
Yeah, so my personal opinion is that we definitely need batteries for this transition, and that it is very important. You see it not only in the EV transition from combustible to electric engines, but also if you think about storing energy for your homes. So there is a lot of people that are using photovoltaic in their households, for example. My dad, for example, bought a battery to store some energy that he is gaining over his photovoltaic system during the day, so that he can use it when the sun is not shining. So I think it's very important that we get those homegrown batteries in Europe, and especially if you think about what COVID has shown us. That those global supply chains are very sensitive to those global crises, and we should be more resilient to those changes in the international landscape, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've also talked about how maintaining a clean room environment, particularly in battery industry, is quite energy intensive. You've talked about the importance of heating and ventilation to quite an extreme level to keep everything at the perfect environment. Are there any future developments or technologies that you could see which could help reduce energy use and improve the sustainability of the battery industry?
Obviously, reducing the size of the needed clean and dry rooms, for example, is one big possibility to cut the cost. Even though I'm probably cutting my own leg by wanting to reduce the clean rooms, they are very cost intensive in building them, so in capex, but also in OPEX and operating them, because this dehumidification process and this continuous ventilation and filtering of those cubic meters of air is very expensive. So definitely reducing the size of the rooms, and probably even bringing down the size of the rooms to machine level, so that you would actually only build a very small clean and dry room around the equipment. This is like one of the highest discussed or most discussed topics lately is mini or micro environments in the industry.
Oh,
So there is already a lot of companies that are pursuing this and working on this. And yeah, I have high hopes for new innovations in this field in the next year to cut the cost and be even more sustainable. And then the recycling of batteries, I think, is also something very important. I mean, this is not this doesn't directly sound that it's about cutting energy cost. But of course, if you can get back some of the material and you do not
yeah,
have to like bring it on the level you need from scratch from raw material, but you can basically recycle part of it and be yeah, more sustainable. I think this is also one of the most important tracks that we need to follow. And
definitely.
last but not least is the use of renewables to produce batteries. I think this is also something very interesting because it was a widely known prejudice that has been pushed a lot, that you have a very high carbon footprint with an electric vehicle just
Yeah.
right after buying it without even driving a single kilometer, because producing those batteries that are so energy intensive and producing them with a very bad energy mix somewhere in Asia, for example,
Yeah.
would cause them to have a very high carbon footprint already before you use them. But if we can ensure to use renewables for producing them, basically we can take out that prejudice. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, do you have any key takeaways or final thoughts that you'd like to share about the importance of clean rooms or technical cleanliness?
Um, yeah, I would say that the more we develop in the future and the
Yeah.
further we go with shrinking components and probably at someday implanting chips or something, we will find more and more clean rooms.
Yes,
So therefore, I think it's a very interesting topic to get into, also for graduates from the university.
definitely.
Um, so I really hope that more and more machine manufacturers identify this potential and get into the supply chain of producing machines for the clean rooms, also in Europe, so that we can strengthen the industry there. And hopefully also we can see some more universities picking up that topic and
Yeah.
basically teaching the people about those and yeah, offering lectures so that we have more skilled personnel with knowledge coming from the university without having to learn everything in their work environment then later on. That would be
Yeah.
great.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. It was so fascinating.
Thank you as well.